Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Vaccine passports, they're here, just like we told you they would. New York City now requiring proof of vaccination in order to eat at restaurants and do other indoor things as well. It's just the beginning. We would have that in California, by the way, right now, if it weren't for the recall of our governor, which takes place on September 14th. So he's a little more hesitant to do this kind of stuff. But it's here now, and it's all across Europe, as we've been talking about. Now, Target, Walmart, Home Depot, McDonald's, all requiring masks again inside. Are you kidding me? I feel like we could just replay all of last year's shows and it would all be relevant. And what the heck is wrong with us? Do not comply. By the way, we just got words yesterday that there's 1.6 billion masks. 1.6 billion masks in our oceans. That's like 1.6 billion. That's like, if you stack them up, it'd be like from the moon, here to the moon 12 times or something. That's a ton of masks. And it's also going to take 450 years for a mask to decompose. So, a good thing we banned plastic straws, though. Otherwise, we'd have masks and straws in our oceans. They banned plastic bags here in California a year or so ago, all because of this picture right here of a turtle eating a plastic bag. We don't have plastic bags here in California. That's the picture that did it. Can someone, for the love of Pete, find a turtle, feed it a mask, snap a picture, and we could be done with this mask nonsense already? And I'm not saying the turtle has to eat the mask. Just take a bite out of it and snap a shot and then take the mask away and just, for the sake of the turtles, can we apparently for the sake of the children's not enough. How about for the sake of the turtles? Can we stop with the masks? This is what we're going to do in this segment. We're going to debunk masks. And please share this far and wide. Have you ever seen a single study on the effectiveness of masks? Have you seen and I don't mean some infographic on BuzzFeed. A study. Have you seen a real scientific study on the effectiveness of masks? The most compelling thing I've heard about masks is from The Guardian. It was a engineer, works at some university in England. I forget which one. He said, he's like, doctors and other scientists, they can't describe size. They can't fathom size. So I'm an engineer. Let me do this for you. Compared to the size of a virus particle, the material gaps in the blue surgical masks that everyone's wearing, the gaps are 1,000 times the size of a virus particle, and cloth masks are 500,000 times the size. He said it would be like if you threw marbles at scaffolding. He's like, maybe a marble would hit a bar of scaffolding and bounce back, but most of them would make it through and hit the building. So just to get an idea of how big 1,000 times something is, if you're 6 feet tall, imagine you are a COVID virus particle. Right? You're a COVID virus. The gap in these surgical masks is 5 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other. So there's your Empire State Building. Imagine 5 of those stacked on top of each other. You're a virus particle, and you have to somehow make it through the gap. Can you do it? Can you walk through a gap 5 Empire State Buildings tall? I reckon you can make it. And that's our blue surgical mask. Now, every time I say that, I get some email, oh, Slater, what about the droplets, the aerosol droplet, blah, blah, blah. Fine, that's for sick people. That's for sick people who are out coughing and sneezing all over the place. I'm not doing that. My 4-year-old in math class in pre-K is not doing that. You don't have to strap him up with a mask all day if you're just walking around. I got a study here. This is from the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine. All right? So I was doing some research on masks. I was wondering, has anyone ever done a study on masks' effectiveness? And I wanted some information, so I came across this study right here. This is June 2015, all right? So this is well before COVID, all right? June 2015. The title of this journal article is Unmasking the Surgeons, the Evidence Behind the Use of Face Masks in Surgery. Okay, this is the blue surgical face mask that everyone wears. So how effective are blue surgical masks during surgery? And they were doing this because there was National Health Service in England. They wanted to cut some costs. So they're looking at, well, what can we cut? And someone's like, well, what about masks? Do they work? And there's 3 researchers from Oxford who wrote this article, right? So why do you think surgeons wear surgical masks? Why do you think they wear them? I would say it's to stop drool. I don't mean to be gross, right? But if you have a surgeon who's standing over you and doing surgery, cutting you open, I don't want drool coming out, right? That would be the reason I would think. Kudos, by the way, to these three scientists for asking this question. So here's what a couple quotes here I got for you. Ready? It's from 2015. Examination of the literature revealed much of the published work on this matter to be quite dated and often had poor methodologies. So why do we wear them? Masks are a quintessential part of the surgical attire that has become so deeply ingrained in the public perception of the profession. However, even today, it remains unclear as to whether they confer any tangible benefits to surgical outcomes at all. So it's just, we do it because we do it. And when you think of someone doing surgery, you just assume they have a mask on, right? You picture them with a mask on, but why? Are they worth it? So they did a survey on surgeons. 96% of surgeons wear them. 20% wore them just because it's tradition, which is what you do. 30% of surgeons said that it made their job harder by fogging up their glasses or other tools, and it obscured their vision. Check this out. Intuition would suggest that face masks offer a physical barrier, preventing the emanation of droplets from the oral or nasal passages. That's what we're told why we got to wear masks for COVID. However, there are a number of different hypotheses as to why this may not be the case. They're saying it doesn't even stop the emanation of droplets from your mouth. I'll go on. In the modern era, there's also been a scarcity of experimental evidence to support the effectiveness of face masks in the prevention of surgical site infections. The earliest retrospective studies failed to demonstrate any statistically significant improvement in surgical site infection rates following the use of masks. So they do some surgeries with masks, some surgeries without. No change in the infection rate of people, depending on whether they're wearing the surgeons are wearing masks or not wearing masks. That's why you would wear them, right? To prevent an infection. So they did the study and no difference whatsoever. Statistical analysis of the extracted data revealed no statistically significant association between mask usage and the incidence of surgical site infection. It is unclear whether the wearing of surgical face masks by members of the surgical team has any impact on surgical wound infection rates for patients undergoing surgery. So there's not even a reason to wear surgical masks during surgery, let alone Home Depot. Are you with me? Please share this wide. The study's on our website, MikeSlater.locals.com. Please go read the study. It's a short article here. Doesn't take forever to read. And they're saying, they're like, yeah, it doesn't really do anything for surgery. And we got to wear, our kindergartners got to wear it. So they go on and they're like, yeah, well, our guidelines still say that it's important in maintaining theater discipline. And the people, the Oxford scientists who wrote this study, they said, well, that seems like, that's vague, right? Like, you just wear it, theater discipline, you just wear it because that's what we do, but you just wear it because it's tradition? No, we need a better reason than that. You would think there would, like, surgical masks, it's such an obvious thing to wear, right? You would think there would be studies out there that say, oh yeah, when you wear surgical masks, it decreases surgical infection by 40%. Right? If you don't wear a mask, then the person's going to get infected with something, and if they do, then they don't. That's why surgical masks are so important. You think there'd be some major data study like that? There's none. Here's these people in Oxford, they're like, yeah, it doesn't make a difference. Mask, no mask, whatever. And this is not a surprise to people. We knew this was the case. We're going to skip to a different article. New England Journal of Medicine. New England Journal of Medicine. May 2020, right in the beginning of COVID, right? This is what they said. We know that wearing a mask outside healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. They're like, yeah, of course masks don't work outside, like, for people. Home Depot, Target, Walmart, McDonald's, is that right? They're like, yeah, of course it doesn't do anything for regular people. So the question was, should we require masks in hospitals? That was the point of this article. Should we require masks in articles? And then again, they said, yeah, I mean, people don't need to wear them. Like, out and about doing things. Here's what they concluded. It is also clear that masks serve symbolic roles. Masks are not only tools, they're also talismans, like good luck charms, that may help increase healthcare workers' perceived sense of safety, well-being, and trust in their hospitals. So they're like, I mean, do we make people in hospitals wear them? I don't know. I mean, they don't really do anything, but it'll tell people that we're taking the pandemic seriously. It'll be kind of like a lucky rabbit's foot, good luck charm, like a talisman. So, yeah, I guess when people are in hospitals, we should make people wear them. That was the New England Journal of Medicine back in May. So these people know that masks don't do anything. All right, let's go back to the 2015 journal article, right? This is the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine. So first, they just debunked the idea that some infection leaves the surgeon into the patient. Okay, well, what about something from the patient into the surgeon, right? Could it stop blood or other bodily fluids from splattering out of the patient into the doctor? So they go through the risk of different people in the operating room and their chances of getting splattered with blood in the face. I'm not kidding, that's what the article talks about. It says a lead surgeon doing a C-section has a 62% chance of getting splashed with blood. Okay, so we want to prevent blood from going into the mouth. But there are studies to suggest that the masks fail to protect surgeons from potentially hazardous sub-micrometer contaminants. This corresponds roughly to the size range of infectious bacteria, while viruses are even smaller. So they say it doesn't even stop bacteria and viruses. That's what they listen. I'm not making this up. I'm quoting from the journal article from 3 Oxford professors. They're Oxford scientists, researchers, back in 2015. They're like, yeah, I mean, I guess it could stop a drop of blood from going directly in your mouth, but if it goes on your mask, all the bacteria and the virus can still get in anyway. So it doesn't even prevent that. But let's strap every kindergartner in a mask all day during school. All right, let me give you the conclusion. If surgical face masks were to be introduced today without the historical impetus currently associated with their use, the experimental evidence would not be sufficiently compelling to incorporate face masks into surgical practice. So what they're saying is, imagine we haven't been wearing face masks in surgery. I'm talking about surgeons here, not Home Depot. Right? Imagine if surgeons haven't been wearing them for the last 50 plus years or so. And then someone came in and said, hey, surgeons, you know what we should do? We should wear masks. We should put this mask over our face when we do this surgery. First of all, they'd laugh at you. That's ridiculous. But then maybe someone would be like, okay, let's do some study on it. Let's do some studies. Let's do some surgeries with, some without. We'll do some studies on, do they block virus particles, bacteria particles, either leaving the mouth or coming in? Let's do some studies on this. Get back to me with the numbers. So the researchers would do their studies and they'd come back. And here's the journal article saying, it'd be inconclusive. It wouldn't be enough. If surgical face masks were to introduce today without the historical use, the experimental evidence would not be sufficiently compelling to incorporate face masks. The results will come back, maybe it helps, but not a lot, if any. Again, these are surgical masks on surgeons performing surgery. And we're told we have to wear them all day long to stay safe from a virus? Give me a break. This morning I thought of a good mask analogy. Masks stop the spread of COVID. As to those, we're going to go back to our SAT analogy. Masks stop the spread of COVID as to the, as seen on TV, ab vibrator belts that burn the fat away. If you think having that thing jiggle your fat for 30 minutes a day is going to make you jacked, then you probably think that wearing a mask will stop the spread of COVID. Now, you may be saying, Slater, what do you know? You're some idiot talk show host, blah, 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 blah. Who made you a doctor? I'm just quoting from the journal article. What do you want me to do? But I'll give you this. This is Michael Osterholm yesterday. Who's Michael Osterholm? Michael Osterholm is a guy I never thought I'd ever quote in my entire life ever again. I'll tell you why. He was the first person that made me panic about COVID back in March 20th of 2020. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He did a, 3-hour interview on Joe Rogan talking about how dangerous COVID is. He is the head epidemiologist at the University of Minnesota. You have the Imperial College of London, and then you have the University of Minnesota. Those are the two groups that have their models that said millions of people are going to die and everyone needs to freak out and panic. I listened to Michael Osterholm, And I was tricked. Alas, here he is on CNN yesterday.
We know today that many of the face cloth coverings that people wear are not very effective in reducing any of the virus movement in or out. Either you're breathing out or you're breathing in. And in fact, if you're in the upper Midwest right now, anybody who's wearing their face cloth covering can tell you they can smell all the smoke that we're still getting. We need to talk about better masking. We need to talk about N95 respirators, which would do a lot for both people who are not yet vaccinated or not previously infected, protecting them, as well as keeping others who might become infected, having been vaccinated, from breathing out the virus.
They've known it all along. Michael Osterholm and all the rest, he's on Biden's task force now. They've known it all along that the surgical masks don't do anything other than kill turtles and pollute our oceans. They knew. They've always known. Now, of course, he's using that. He's being like, oh, well, those don't work. We need to use N95s. And we can table that. We'll talk about that one another day. But let's reflect on the fact that we were told you should never question the efficacy of surgical masks for a year and a half. And they're still mandating our kids wear them today. And add that to the lab leak theory and all the rest of things that you should never question that turned out to be a bunch of bunk. And they knew it the whole time. Now imagine if any of these people had an ounce of humility, just a virus particle sized of humility, and said, hey everyone, we thought these masks would do good, but it turns out we tested it and they don't. Actually, really sorry about that. So let's move on with some, no. They don't do that. But think if they did, what would that do for our trust in institutions? It would help a lot. Instead, they keep flip-flopping and lying and then treat you like an idiot for noticing. Treat you like an idiot for quoting a 2015 journal article about how surgical masks don't even really do anything for surgeons. MikeSlater.locals.com. We have that whole journal article. It's very short. You can spread it far and wide. And don't put your masks on when you go anywhere ever again. Even if you become a surgeon one day, you don't even have to wear your surgical mask then. Hey, stay up with the truth here on the first. Unless you want to keep trusting the mainstream, by all means, keep watching them. If you want the truth, if you want to get ahead of the game, listen to the first. Well, you are, and I appreciate that. But just so you know, you can watch us anywhere on your phone. Just download it, Android, iPhone, of course. Totally free. Everyone's right there. Super easy interface. It's so you click the app, it opens, you click a video, boom, it plays. That's it. The first TV in the App Store. Mike Slater, spread the word. Oh, Slater Crusaders, another piece of the puzzle has fallen right into place. Not about vaccine passports, although that's a different puzzle over here. This one's a little bit different. The slippery slope is real. Never forget that. Whenever anyone says, oh, that's a slippery slope fallacy. No. Slippery slope is real. David Sachs, he is one of the co-founders of PayPal back in 1999. He says, I created this as a revolutionary idea, that regular people would no longer be dependent on large financial institutions to start a business. But now, PayPal is turning its back on its original mission. It is now leading the charge to restrict participation by those it deems unworthy. PayPal has become an activist company. I think when people think big tech, they think the social media companies. But one of the points of this segment is I want us all to understand that big tech is a lot more than just Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Right? It's also Amazon, as you saw how they treated Parler. And it's PayPal and all these financial institutions, these San Francisco financial institutions. They're an activist company. Everyone knows GoFundMe. There's a Christian version called Give, Send, Go. They raised money to bring people to the president's January 6th event. And PayPal wouldn't allow it. PayPal cut it off. But I want to be clear, this wasn't like a bailout fund for people arrested for rioting in January 6th. That would be one thing. Although Kamala Harris, when she was, I guess this would have been, yeah, this would have been, she was running, she said, People need to donate to the bailout funds of people who rioted during Black Lives Matter riots, right? That was fine. But that's not even what this was like, hey, everyone, the president's speaking, so people want to go donate money so they can go and watch the president speak. And PayPal said, nope, not good enough. You're out. Can't use PayPal. Then PayPal started working with the Southern Poverty Law Center to ban certain users, and now they're working with the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, to do the same. It's not just social media accounts. Now, the problem is, among other things, white supremacy is what they say they're fighting against, right? But anything, they define it. White supremacy is defined by them as any policy that results in disparate outcome. So if you believe that we should have SATs, well, white people do better on SATs than black people, so you're a white supremacist. If you think we should judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, well, you're a racist. You're not anti-racist, you're racist. Are you with me? And they're the people who get to define this. Who? Anti-Defamation League, Southern Poverty Law Center, now PayPal. And if you go against what their beliefs are, their standards are, then you don't get to do any financial transactions. And it's not just going to be PayPal. Everyone else will eventually join. Again, back to the founder. He said, so he talks about how he used to work, when he was the CEO of PayPal. He's like, yeah, we used to work with law enforcement for if genuinely illegal things were going on, right? But we're talking about something very different here. We're talking about shutting down people and organizations that express views that are entirely lawful, even if they're unpopular in Silicon Valley. And he also makes the point, this is important, that the government is leading this. Because here's why. The tech companies want Section 230. I know you've heard about Section 230. We've talked about it a couple times on the show here. We can go into greater detail with it another day. But for today's conversation, the tech companies, big tech wants Section 230. Right? But the government comes in and says, wow, we're going to get rid of it. And that would destroy their business. So the government says, hey, we're going to get rid of Section 230. Or else you can maybe do a little of this for us, help us out here on this, right? You know? So they're holding the sword over big tech's head. Do this, do what we say, ban these users, ban this, ban that, or else we'll ban you. Here's the key insight from the founder of PayPal, one of the founders of PayPal. I've only heard two people make this point before, Jesse Kelly and now the co-founder of PayPal. When the left pushes hard in one direction, and this could be with COVID, big tech, lots of different things, there will be elements in this country that push back, and it will be violent. And it will, from that will emerge a leader and a movement that you and I won't like. And there will be a real strong man, not Trump. Please. Trump was a weenie compared to the real strong man that's going to emerge to push back against what the left is doing in our country today. And that is it's going to emerge because of the ridiculous overreach from the left. Jesse's talked about this a lot. This co-founder of PayPal, he says the elite left has hollowed out the middle class of America for a long time. And they acted like they had a monopoly on truth, morality, and decency. So Trump comes in, and the founder of PayPal, he says, an uncouth billionaire. Uncouth means like impolite, okay? The leader that's going to emerge in this country to push back against the left, he's going to be a lot more than uncouth, okay? No one ever described Hitler as uncouth. Oh, yeah, Stalin, he was quite uncouth. No, okay? It's going to be a lot worse than that. But anyway, this guy's point is that Trump emerged out of that, right? Out of that despair. And it was like people's way to stick it to the left. Trump's gone. But the attack on a major portion of our country is ramped up more than ever before. Now you're racist and white supremacist and all the rest. And he ultimately concludes, with PayPal, if we continue down this path, a far more dangerous demagogue could emerge. And to that, I say my normal refrain of read a book. Far more dangerous? Far more, like Trump? You think Trump was dangerous? Trump wasn't dangerous. Right? Trump was nothing. I mean, listen, if you, okay. Other than Trump rounding up all the Muslims and putting them in internment camps, Trump wasn't dangerous. Okay. So if you think, and the genocide of all the gay people in America. So if you rounding up of all the Muslims, killing of all the gays, other than that, Trump wasn't dangerous. See what I'm doing? See what I'm getting at? Trump was nothing compared to what could come. Look to Europe. They're just a little bit ahead of us. In France, the Ministry of the Interior, so official government reports say over 200,000 protesters across France protested against vaccine passports. And some things got pushy. I share this and I share what's going on around the world because there's been no demonstrations in America. A couple rallies with moms and kids, right, standing outside of school board meetings, sure. But nothing like the mass uprising that, well, Europe has. They're just a little bit ahead of us. And the let them eat cake attitude from the left, I've never seen anything like it. It's not even a let them eat cake, it's a let them get sick and die. This is Margaret Hoover, who's more on the conservative side on George Stephanopoulos' show. She said, if you're going to get government-provided health care, VA treatment, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, you should be getting the vaccine because we're going to have to take care of you on the back end. I keep hearing more and more in this from more official quarters, that if you get sick with COVID, you shouldn't get health care treatment. I've never seen that with anything else. I've never seen anyone say, well, if you have AIDS, that's your fault. That's your fault for being gay. Or if you have lung cancer, did you smoke? That's your fault. Sorry, no health care. You had a heart attack? Well, you're kind of fat. You've had too many Twinkies. Sorry, that's your fault. You're a bad decision. I've never heard that ever. Oh, you got a gunshot wound? You're a drug dealer, so that's your fault. Oh, you had a suicide attempt? Well, we're just going to let you out of your misery then, right? We're not going to treat you. I've never heard this ever until now. Where if you get sick with COVID and don't have the vaccine, then we're not even going to treat you in the hospital. And you can't participate in the rest of society. To the point where we won't even fund your business. We won't even let you do business over PayPal. And as David Frum said the other day, you conservatives, you're lucky to even exist because Biden's America produces 70% of the wealth around here anyway. And the crackdowns, because of this attitude of you don't matter, you don't count, you don't deserve to live even if you get sick, because of this othering attitude, the crackdowns are only going to get worse if you don't comply. In Pakistan, there's 4 provinces in Pakistan. One of them just started a 4-phase program. Your first is you get a text message telling you to get a vaccine. The second phase, guys, do we have the graphic of this one? What's the second phase? Second phase is they cut you. This is the memo. The second phase is they cut you out of social media, your social media accounts. The third phase is they won't let you make any outgoing phone calls. And the fourth phase is they won't let you make any outgoing calls or receive any incoming calls or texts. Okay? It's important to share these examples across the world because this is the bend of human nature. People force people to do things. And that will be done here more and more if we let it. You must stop it. Look at what we're still doing here. It's insane. Look at what's going on around the world. They're a little bit ahead of us. Stop letting the power-hungry people take more power. We must put a stop to it now. Coming up, I want to talk to a teacher who wrote this amazing new book about the effect COVID has had on our kids in the classroom. We'll do that next. Spread the word.
Guidance is very clear about where we should be in schools, and that is everyone who is in a K through 12 school in the fall should be masked. Everyone across the country, adults, children, vaccinated or unvaccinated, everyone should be masked.
Ugh. Can't believe we're still doing this. I want to go right to our next guest to talk about the psychological and social harm that masking and distancing and all of this stuff has had on our kids. He's a teacher in Bakersfield, California. He's got a new book called Hollowed Out, A Warning About America's Next Generation. I'm about 80% through, and it's a fantastic book. Please go read it. Hollowed Out. Jeremy Adams. Mr. Adams, how are you, sir?
I am great, Mr. Slater. How are you today?
Great to talk to you again. I'm glad you're here. And what's so fascinating is you wrote this book, and you've seen the effects of what's happening well before COVID. COVID just, put the pedal to the metal here. So let's do pre-COVID. What have you been seeing our kids do differently than in generations past?
Yeah, great question. So, what's interesting is almost all of the problems I identify in the book have happened in the last 5 to 10 years. I'm starting my 23rd year teaching next week. And what I've noticed is some profound pivots in the behavior of my students in the last 5 to 10 years. And these are not just kind of your normal generational schisms that happen between, people getting older and their children. I'm talking about profound changes. I think a lot of people don't realize the extent to which young Americans live their lives today completely untethered to a traditional adult values, traditional adult responsibilities, and most of all, adult role models. So when you look at what was happening before the pandemic began, many of my students who I like very much and I care about very much, they were on their devices for 9 or 10 hours a day. And one of the things that a lot of the teachers in the trenches have noticed, and again, it's not the politician or the pundit who has really had a front row seat to American decline. It's the teachers. What we have noticed is a lot of what we would consider odd behavior. Young people who are not dating, young people who are not reading books anymore, not going to football games, not going to the movies. And what you see is a lot of the connective tissue, a lot of the connections that traditionally give young life its meaning and its purpose is simply not there for our young people. Half of all 18 to 34-year-olds don't have a romantic partner. The desire for marriage and family is in free fall. 1 out of 5 millennials don't have what they would call a good friend in the entire world. And their knowledge of religion, and it's none of my business if my students are religious or not, but they don't even really know anything about the teachings of the world's great religions. And that's not even to start talking, Mike, about the fact that they are the least patriotic generation in American history, as well as the most miserable.
Yeah. You painted this picture of when the bell rings, and we've all been there, the bell rings and everyone busts out of the room like the classroom's on fire, just because they want to go socialize and hang out and have fun and whatever. What do you see now?
Great question. And I see it, by the way, in my own children. A lot of people think this book is about the frustrations of Mr. Adams, 20-year civics teacher. It's also as dad, and a lot of the mistakes that I've made as a parent. And it's interesting, when the students have a minute or two after class, or when you go to a gathering and teenagers are hanging out, when you and I grew up, it was kind of rowdy. You gossiped, you talked, you flirted. You did all the things that are joyful and jubilant about being young and alive. And nowadays, silence, absolute silence falls over the classroom. You go sometimes watch teenage gatherings, or you even watch, young Gen Zers on a date, and they are on their phones. And so that those connections that traditionally we are learning to forge in our childhood, and a lot of the wisdom that older Americans kind of give to their children. Young people are not around their parents the way they used to. They don't eat family dinners the way that they used to. Again, for the last 16 months, they're not around their teachers the way that they're used to. So young people, the message of Hollowed Out is very simple. Young people are going to acquire a value system from somewhere. They are going to acquire a belief system from somewhere. And when the adults have left the building, when there's not mom and dad and older siblings and parents and ministers and friends, what you have instead is this toxic cauldron of social media and lots of negativity about the country. And so, again, we are human beings that learn by example. And we are either improved or depraved by the examples in front of us. And I think we know what's happening. The adults have left the building.
Brilliant. Everyone go buy the book. Let's talk about now we've thrown masks on kids, and we've put kids in back-to-back Zoom meetings for 6 hours every day, and we teach kids to be distant and stay away. Like, holy cow. Like, we've just put that on crazy overdrive. And I love your New York Times or LA Times article about the effect this is going to have. Let's start with academically, and then we can go into socially. Like little kids not learning how to do their vowels properly, or kids in pre-calc not learning what they need to do to get into calculus. We're going to see ramifications of this academically for a long time, not even to mention the kids who just didn't even go to school for a year.
Yeah, I think the academic point is the easy point, and sadly and tragically, it's the small point. It's actually the socialization that really, really worries me. So much of the value of going to school is about learning the habits that you're going to need in order to be a successful adult someday. Learning how to get up every day, learning how to engage, your coworkers, or in this situation, your teachers or your coworker, your peers. Doing the work every day, learning how to be organized, learning how to study for a test. And I hate to be so grim about it, but frankly, a lot of childhood is learning how to do the things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
I am the proud parent of 2 teenage daughters, which means, it's not just COVID that's aging me, it's being a dad. And oftentimes when my daughters say to me, Dad, I don't want to do something, I tell them, kids, 95% of adulthood is doing the things you don't want to do because you love something more than you love yourself. You love your family. You love the institution you work for. You love your God. You love your country. Sacrifice, self-reliance, duty, obligation. And yet the way that so many of our students have been living for the last 16 months is they will fully admit that they have turned off their cameras. I didn't know most of my students last year. I just saw a name. They're in bed, in their pajamas, distracted, texting, watching Netflix, able to turn in their work as late as they want to, don't really have to study for a test because everything is open note. And again, I'm not saying that this wasn't necessary for a large part of last year. It might, probably was, I think. But let's not pretend that there is not serious consequences to it. And at some point, we have to learn how to teach our young people about the things that, and not to be too romantic here, early in the morning, but we're talking about the meaning of life here. We're talking about aspirations. We're talking about finding joy in your life. And if you don't learn how to use your freedom to attach yourself to things like love and family and faith and community and institutions you believe in, you're going to be hollowed out.
Read the book. It's got the solutions as well. Hollowed Out, a warning about America's next generation. Written, or at least inspired pre-COVID, amplified post. Hollowed Out. Jeremy Adams. Mr. Adams, wonderful to talk to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to me that I was on. Take care.
I hope my kids have teachers like you. Hollowed Out. Go buy it. Talk about the infrastructure bill coming up next. Spread the word. Later, Crusaders, we have a bipartisan infrastructure bill, which means it's amazing. It's an infrastructure bill, so you can't question anything about it because our infrastructure is crumbling. And it's bipartisan, which means it's perfect in every single way. It's only $1 trillion, nothing, and it's 3,000 pages. So some light reading that I'm sure every senator has been diligently looking at all week long. Our friend Joel Griffith is here, research fellow at Heritage, to give us the latest. Joel, how are you, brother?
Hey, doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Can we even begin to describe what the heck could possibly be in this thing? Where do you want to start?
Well, we're still trying to read through it. As you mentioned, this is several thousand pages in length, and they're trying to ram this through. But just on the surface, there's definitely some things that jump out, such as billions of dollars for zero-emission school buses and electric ferries and equitable broadband. And that's just the wasteful spending components. But remember, each and every dollar of this massive package is another dollar that we're borrowing from the future or that we're printing. And we're already seeing the economic consequences of some of that massive spending. And this just adds to it. Some of the worst deals that we've ever gotten as a country have been these bipartisan deals. Republicans and Democrat politicians alike are susceptible to the joys of spending other people's money and future generations' money, and that's exactly what this is.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the bipartisan part. Like, that really does shut down a lot of people's brains of thinking like, oh, well, then it must be okay. But everyone loves wasting money in DC, right? That's bipartisan.
Well, that's right. Politicians love to be able to point to their pet projects for, or handouts to constituents in their district, but we're compounding this. We're multiplying this by hundreds of districts and by 100 senators. There's something in it for everybody. But what politicians don't like to remind us is that we have to pay for it. Either we're going to have to tax and spend it, or we're going to have to borrow, we're going to have to print it. There's no free lunch on this. And something even more dangerous about this bill is really this is going to be a back door through a process called reconciliation, which we can talk about if you'd like. But this is going to be a back door to forcing through even more of a radical left-wing agenda in the coming months if this passes.
Well, lay it on me, because I heard some Green New Deal-like things when you just talked about, green this, elect ferries, blah, blah, blah. What is reconciliation? We've all heard the word. What is it?
Yeah, so for most of these spending packages, in order to avoid a filibuster, you have to have 60 senators come on board. 60 senators can get together and vote to cut off debate and move a bill forward. So you got to have 60 votes. So that's what they're working towards here. They're going to have the Democrats and maybe 8 or 9 or 10 Republican senators join on board, and they can pass this. Well, once this passes, Congress can then pass new legislation that will be really amendments to this. It'll reconcile it. And a reconciliation only requires 51 votes. Now, that reconciliation sounds pretty innocuous. You think, oh, we're going to clarify a few things, make a few changes. But no. Reconciliation allows enormous changes to happen. And what those that are far to the left in Congress hope to do is actually pass basically a Green New Deal through reconciliation, and also pass amnesty for millions of people that are here illegally. And they're going to somehow relate it to infrastructure, because, hey, we're redefining words all the time now. Why not redefine infrastructure? Yeah. And that's why this is really so dangerous.
Totally. And that's like a brilliant scam that they're pulling. How do the 10 or so Republicans who are signing on to the initial bill not see right through that and know the Trojan horse-ness of it?
Well, as it is a Trojan horse, and they should see through it. These are some of the most esteemed and knowledgeable political leaders in our country. But once again, this package, this infrastructure package, is filled with goodies, and politicians want to claim credit for that. And if that means disastrous consequences in other policy matters going forward, they've made a determination that that's something they're comfortable with. And most people, we're trying to live our lives. Most people aren't focused on arcane parliamentary rules of procedure. But this is something that people need to pay attention to, even if you've never heard these words before, these concepts before, because this is something that'll have a very real impact on your financial future, and it'll have a very real impact on how our democracy will function going forward. You shouldn't be passing Green New Deals or massive amnesty under cover of an infrastructure bill, but that's what they're trying to do.
And so last question about this. I saw some video the other day, some brainwashed progressive, and they use the word crumbling infrastructure. The only time the word crumbling is ever used by people, it's followed by the word infrastructure. And 90% of the time anyone uses the word infrastructure, it's always preceded by the word crumbling. And that's how you could tell someone's brainwashed when they use the word crumbling infrastructure. What percentage of this bill would you even say has anything to do with infrastructure? Because there's a big PR push by the left for a long time to say blank is infrastructure. And they would just like, they'd be like, child care is infrastructure, right? So it's like, whatever is infrastructure. Why'd they do that?
Well, we're still combing through the 2,700 pages. What we do know are that the prior proposal, the big infrastructure package, only about 10% of that package even was going to things that we think of, such as bridges or roads or freeways or ports. The vast majority, 90% or so, would go to other things that they're just tagging as infrastructure. And this whole idea of crumbling infrastructure across the country, yeah, there are some infrastructure problems in this country, but it's not for lack of spending. We're shoveling billions of dollars towards mass transit programs in New York City, Chicago, and LA that are badly mismanaged, because oftentimes they're paying some of these public sector union employees $200,000 plus a year, which is 3 or 4 times what the typical worker is making. And meanwhile, you have some states like Florida that are actually much better managed, and their infrastructure is far better than some of these crumbling infrastructure situations that you have in states that just squander taxpayer resources all the time.
Of course. Joel, always good to talk to you, brother. Joel Griffith of the Heritage Foundation. Get back to reading.
All right, thanks. Talk soon.
Got some work to do. Thanks, man. I haven't gotten to look at the Cuomo accusations yet. My prediction is he waits it out, doesn't do anything, and nothing will happen. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word.